Chess learners, Robert James Fischer, a legendary chess player, often used a specific strategy to defeat various opponents in different games, winning almost every time. We'll explore this technique, which Fischer employed as white against Pudzov's black in a World Olympics match. To understand how you can apply it in your games, Fischer here faces the Sicilian defense and he's going for the open variation. Again, stick till the end. I'll show you how you use the same plan against different openings, so knight to c3 and black goes for the dragon variation. And that's one of the main characteristic features that enables you to use this plan. It is when your opponent fianchettos his bishop, which happens in the king's Indian defense, Grunfeld defense, Perk defense, and whatnot. Now, what you want to do here is to trade off this fianchetto bishop because then all these holes on the king's side will become vulnerable to your future attack. And you do that by playing bishop e3, and after that, in the future, you do want to play queen d2 to establish a battery along this diagonal, which enables you to play bishop h6. So that's what you do want to play. There is one thing that you need to be aware of, is that sometimes your opponent can jump with their knight to g4 and try to chase this bishop with the knight, attack it this way. So Fischer first plays f3 just to cover the square and also solidifies the e4 just in case that your opponent can never attack it. Black played their move nc6. Here follows queen d2, which prepares this bishop h6. It doesn't matter that you have to play it right away, but you always have it available. After black castled, Fischer played another good move in this position. Although you could just castle queenside, which is part of your plan to have opposite side castles, so that you can then focus on your king's side attack. But if white castles right away, sometimes your opponent can try to counterattack in the center of the board with d5. And this tension kind of distracts you from your main plan. Of course, it's still completely playable for white, but just to have it completely clear, instead of castling, you can play bc4, which is a very multi-purpose move, very useful for white in different ways. It stops this move d5 from happening because now you have a lot of control against the square. Plus, your bishop from c4 is actually on an open diagonal and it possibly targets the king, which will also support your future attack. And in some positions, it even plays some defensive role because you're going to castle queenside, so your queenside will have one more defender. Now black played knight d7, which looks awkward at first, but black wants to relocate the knight and start to chase this bishop. Black could play some other moves, but your plan stays the same. You just play the same moves. So castle queenside. Alright, cool. nb6 hits the bishop, so we got to get it back. And now, basically, your plan in a nutshell is very simple. You want to push your h-pawn forward so that you open the h-file and your rook can be involved in your attack across this h-file. Then you play bishop h6, trade off the only main defender of the king, and after that, you checkmate black along the h-file. As Fischer himself described the plan, you go h4, h5, sack, checkmate because very often you need to sack a few pieces in order to open up your opponent's king completely. So that's the plan in a nutshell. Sounds simplistic, but it does work, and it's not that easy for black to counter it anyhow. In the game, black tried knight a5, just going after this active bishop, plus he wants to jump with the other knight to c4, which is now defended by the other knight as well. So he attacks the queen, attacks the bishop, plus attacks this bishop, and so Fischer played a prophylactic move, queen d3, just to cover this square. Now, that was a slight deviation from our main setup, because in the main setup, we want to play bishop h6 instead, and trade off this bishop. So it's a slight deviation, but overall, it didn't change the situation drastically. Overall, our plan remains to be the same. Black plays bishop d7, and now Fischer plays h4, so that's the start of our main plan. Black played rook c8. There's also an interesting nuance here, that if black ever takes on b3, like classical chess tutorials teach us to take towards the center, meaning to capture with this pawn, for instance. But when you have your king there, sometimes it makes sense to capture with a c-pawn because now you have this barrier on the queen side, and so you can always move your king there to b1, to stand behind this pawn wall, and then the king is just rock solid, your pawn can't do anything against this king standing there, and you can easily develop your attack on the king side. That reason, black did not take on b3. In the game, he played rook c8. White's plan is still the same, very simple, just keep pushing forward with h-file. Black played knight c4, he's also trying to create some counterplay on the queen side, but Fischer just ignores it. He plays pawn takes, g6, and the first phase of our plan is finished. We've got the h-file open for our rook. Now the next thing we want to do is to take away this bishop from g7, that covers the king, and therefore Fischer played bishop h6. Now the bishop is guarded by the rook, therefore we're capable of playing this. Black played pawn to e6. Now we could take here, but fundamentally, our plan is to take away this defender, and then to checkmate black along the h-file. Now in order to checkmate black along the h-file, we need to have a battery. So Fischer played f4, aiming to shift the queen to the king side, and to checkmate black then with some queen h3, queen h7, something like this maneuver. Again, very simple, but not easy for black to do anything against that. In the game, he tried e5, trying to somehow maybe distract Fischer from his plan, but true to his quote, Fischer knew that it is Checkmate, so you gotta sometimes be ready to sacrifice a minor piece or two in order to open up the king completely, so instead of, going backwards with the knight, he jumped forward, saying, hey, if you want to expose your king, go ahead. And it turns out that although it's a sacrifice of a knight, if black takes it with a pawn, basically this king is now left completely undefended. Black didn't take it with a pawn, by the way, in the game, just to show what could happen in this case. If white trades there on g7, trading the last defender of the king, we can see that now the king is just completely exposed with no defenders. So no wonder white can checkmate it easily. For example, queen g3, check to the king, our rook is covering this file, and if king has to go forward, and now we can attack in various ways, for instance, queen g5, king e6, now we can finish it off in style with pawn checkmate, with pawn takes f5. Our queen is covering this diagonal, so it is indeed a checkmate. In the actual game, black actually played some creative moves. He decided to take the knight with their bishop, so that king is still having at least some defense. Pawn recaptures. The position is still critical, all by black. Still, we're aiming for the very same checkmating pattern along the h-file, and black has to do something. Plus, currently, this pawn is also joining our attack. But black decided to go all out with his own counterattack, with knight takes b2, saying, hey, I'm going to attack your king just as well. And after king takes it, black played e4. Pretty cool. Black actually makes use of this bishop on g-zone, which is still alive, to create some threats. Because of this pin, the knight cannot move, and if the queen takes on e4, that actually turns out to be a big mistake, because then black can, start this sneaky attack on the queen side, which was not really expected, but now, the situation becomes complex. So in the game, black didn't take there. For sure, just ignore this attack completely. Attack to the knight, attack to the queen. He said, you know what? I don't care. I just want to push my own plan. And he played bishop takes g7, staying true to his agenda. Take away this bishop, and checkmate black. And it turns out that it's actually time for black to resign because what can he do? I mean, he can't just really recapture. In the game, he did that after knight takes e4, he just resigned because white is up a piece, plus f6 check is coming, queen d4 is coming, or queen h3, h7. I mean, white can win however he likes. But how about taking the queen, which was the main variation of the sacrifice? What if black took the queen there instead? It's actually quite a funny thing for white to find here because white just plays f6, completely blocking the king side, and now there is no way for black to avoid rook h8 on the next move. I hope you enjoyed my content very well. Is it so? Then don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Wish you all the best. Bye bye, see ya.